video. All right. It's Alexander Lawrence, the Portable Infinite. We're up to July, and we haven't done this for a couple days, but we're on chapter 4 of Ulysses. So, a lot of people are confused by Ulysses. They don't understand it. But it's probably the modernistic, the great book of modernism, I guess. And it's not an easy read. I was looking at a lot of videos, and like a lot of the books, it's there's I'm gonna probably read some of the other great books of the 20th century: Ulysses, Samuel Beckett, Thomas Mann, The Magic Mountain, maybe Proust, maybe a little of Nabokov, and just I'm just gonna. I'm just reading them for fun, and I'm looking for stuff. Um, you know, I think people are bemoaning that there's no great authors today and nobody's really writing 800-page books anymore. That's true, but that's because there there's not there's no great writers because there's no great readers. So people there's not a thousand it seems like when Eliot, Pound, and Joyce came along, there was like all these intellectuals and professors, and Richard Ellman wrote a great biography of James Joyce and Oscar Wilde, and who the hell, nobody is writing books of these writers that have kind of come into prominence like the last 20 years. Nobody's really, and like my definition of a modernist novel, I think like guys like Charles Dickens and Thomas Hardy, and before Jane Austen and plenty of others, and some Russians, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, they perfected the novel form in the 19th century. There was a after you read Dickens or like David Copperfield or something, there's nothing really to add. You're just going to be writing something that's as good as like a Dickens or a Thomas Hardy novel. Like Henry Miller, or not Henry James. And then the French, you have like Victor Hugo and Flaubert and some of those guys. The Stendhal, who was probably like real early, maybe even 18th century. Those guys wrote about real conventional things like wars and historical events, and the French, the Germans, and like Henry James, who was around at the end of the century and the beginning of the 20th century. He was more like a stylist. He was like a Flaubert, and he was like more like he was like thinking. His books. I haven't read a lot of Henry James, but he's definitely a better writer than E.M. Forster and a lot of English writers that came later. But he's. When people talk about him, they talk about like the style. Maybe I'll even include a Henry James book in here or something. But Joyce is coming after that. The modernist novels of the guys in the 20s, Joyce, Thomas Mann, Proust. What they have, they got everything that the 19th century novelists have, but they got an added there's kind of a meta narrative. There's like always like some kind of parody or satire or history, or so they'll take a novel, like they'll be like our literary references and stuff, or quotations and stuff. When I was hanging out with David Marks, and he would talk about how him and Sorrentino would just be talking about Ulysses and all the literary references, like how this sentence is referring to something else, or this is referring to some music, or this what does this mean? What does Macintosh mean, or in this book? And those guys had read this book so many times that they were talking about, you know, references or quotes that even the professors weren't even talking about because they were so obscure and they didn't know really what they were talking about. So let me read a little bit of the fourth chapter. It's called Calypso. Leopold Bloom's introduced in this chapter. And then I'll kind of like do a little bit of a summary. Okay, Mr. Leopold Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowls. He liked thick giblet soup, nutty gizzards, a stuffed roast heart, liver slices fried with crust, crumbs, fried hen cods, roes. Most of all, he liked grilled mutton kidneys, which gave to his palate a fine tang of faintly scented urine. Kidneys were in his mind as he moved about the kitchen softly, writing her breakfast things on a humpy tray. Gelid light and the air were in the kitchen, but out of doors, gentle summer morning everywhere made him feel a bit peckish. The coals were reddening. Another slice of bread and butter, 3, 4, right. She didn't like her plate full, right. He turned from this tray, lifted the kettle off the hob and set it sideways on the fire. It sat there, dull and squat, its spout stuck out. Cup of tea soon? Good. Mouth dry. The cat walked stiffly round a leg of the table with tail on high. Meow. Oh, there you are, Mr. Bloom said, turning from the fire. The cat mewed in answer and stalked again stiffly round a leg of table, mewing. Just how she stalks over my writing table, purr, scratch my head, purr. Mr. Bloom watched curiously, kindly, the lithe black form, clean to see the gloss of her sleek hide, the white button under the butt of the tail, the green flashing eyes. He bent down to her, his hands on his knees. Milk for the pussins, he said. Meow, the cat cried. They call them stupid. They understand what we say better than we understand them. She understands all she wants to. Vindictive, too. Cruel, her nature. Curious mice never squeal. Seem to like it. Wonder what I took to like her. Height of a tower. No, she can jump me. Afraid of the chicken she is, he said mockingly. Afraid of the chook-chooks? I never saw such a stupid pussins as the pussins. Meow, the cat said loudly. She blinked up out of her avid, shame-closing eyes, meowing plaintively and long, showing him her white milk teeth. He watched the dark eye slits narrowing with greed till her eyes were green stones. Then he went to the dresser, took the jug Hanlon's milk man had just filled for him, poured warm bubbled milk over a saucer and let it and set it slowly on the floor. And so he's kind of like interacting with his cat. He goes on. He wants to buy a kidney. He wants to go to this Douglas's and buy a kidney, and he's like, so we immediately kind of like get the idea that Bloom is not Stephen Dedalus. He's kind of like just he's like thinking like ordinary things. He's kind of he's got a different because we're so familiar from Stephen Dedalus from the other book, and we kind of he's an artist and he's a writer and he's a poet, and this guy's just a regular guy. Like Irishman. He's so you get a lot of his life. He goes to the store. He picks up some letters at the and he's like looking for like kidneys and let's see. He's like just talking about different things. He gets a letter from his daughter and he reads that. Yeah, Millie Bloom is like wrote him a letter. She's on tour or something, and he he mentions metempsychosis a few times in this chapter, which comes back. And yeah, there's the letter, and yeah, that. Let's see what yeah, she mentions a song. What is it? Let's see. Okay, so yeah, oh, and he's going to the he's wearing he wants to wear black clothes because he's going to Patty Dignam's funeral later in the novel. So it's like nine at this time. It's like 9:20. So it's still in the morning here. And the first three chapters are supposed to happen like at the first the second three chapters of the Bloom chapter. So let me just kind of like look at kind of a summary here. So yeah, he's fixes breakfast for the wife, asks Molly if she wants anything, and then Bloom has a slip of paper in his hat, and he has a lucky potato. He gets his house keys, walks outside, black clothes. He has a Patty Dignam funeral. He passes Larry O'Rourke's pub and wonders if he should stop. It mentions Dignam's funeral. Bloom's is he the Bloom imagines his own Irish place. Sleeve Bloom. Bloom arrives at Douglas, sees one kidney left, and then he sees a woman. He's like trying to follow her, and he continues to read a sheet of newspaper on the way. It advertises fruit plantations. Bloom. He's like a non-practicing Jew. He's Jewish, but he's not a non-practicing Jew. So, but and see, Bloom finds two letters and a card in the hall. Bloom senses that one is from Blazes Boylan, and he skims his own letter from Millie. Um, and Molly Bloom is gonna sing a song. Like Blazes Boylan is, they do a little show, and Molly's gonna sing "Love's Old Sweet Song," and our La Chi de Rum. It's and and oh, she asked for a book by Paul de Kock, and Molly smells kidneys burning, and he also had a son, but he died in childbirth, and that's introduced right there. Um, and then he's like thinking about the garden and toiletry. Bloom reads the story Matchum's Master Stroke by Philip Beaufroy. And he goes to, I guess he goes to an outhouse at the end of the book. Yeah, and so episode 1, 2, 3 constitute a prologue centering on Stephen. With episode 4, the morning begins. It is 8 o'clock, and the chapter takes place simultaneously to episode 1, Leopold Bloom. They both notice the same cloud at the same time. So there's a lot of echoes of the first, and they kind of do some of the same thing. Buck takes charge of the tower. Molly takes over the house. Both of them leave without their house keys, and then The last word in episode 1 is usurper, and last word in this chapter is poor dignum. There's, I guess it's like we contrast these two characters, like so, the two different guys who eventually meet up later in the book, and Bloom is obsessed with very fit, the the great things of life, food, alcohol, and is like and he has Molly, and let's see, as Odysseus was helplessly enthralled to the Calypso in the Odyssey, so Bloom is presented in Calypso as paralyzed and enamored by Molly. Thus, we see Joyce using Homeric parallels to produce irony. Molly here is enchanting Calypso, and later the dutiful Penelope. Similarly, Bloom is Odysseus, yet we discover in episode 4 that his only son, Rudy, died soon after birth. Okay, well, so this is a pretty straight. I mean, this is probably like the most straightforward chapter yet. I mean, you can almost start the book here, and yeah, I remember when I was younger, and I told because I've been reading this book. When I read this book in the '80s, I remember I told my friend Jeff that I was reading it. He said something about, oh yeah, I remember a funeral happening or something like that. I go, yeah, that's all he remembered from the book, that the funeral happened. I think that's maybe in chapter 6. I'm guessing. I don't know. So that's it. Fictions is you should be challenging. I mean, you shouldn't have to know everything about books. I mean, I'm not Irish. I've never been to Ireland. I know everything about Irish culture through books, and I'm not like the smartest person on the earth, but it's like, like, hey, Ulysses, it's a great book, and it took me a little while to get used to it and stuff. And I mean, at the same time, I remember I read Clockwork Orange around the same time, and I thought that was difficult, but I've read that since. I read that recently. I read a lot. Maybe during COVID, I read a few books that I read back when I was like 15 or 16, like Kurt Vonnegut, Clockwork Orange, The Lord of the Flies, John Genet books, and I just had a different opinion about them. Like especially Clockwork Orange, I read it like in 4 hours. It was the first time I read it. I mean, because the language, because I thought it was had this kind of difficult language. I might have thought that like back then, but I've read thousands of books now, so Clockwork Orange doesn't seem too difficult. It seems like a pretty straightforward book, and I just read it like in 4 or 6 hours, and it seemed like a pretty conventional novel. Besides all the the Russian words and if you're familiar with the movie Horror Show, Malkovich, Moloko, stuff like that. It's a pretty conventional novel, and yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to show you that these books, I mean, they're great because because the more you look at them, the more you look at the pages and stuff, you can understand that something's going on, and that you can just go, you can read the book. Whereas like books that aren't great are not challenging. They're just sort of little entertainments that you can read in a couple hours and you get everything, and you know, maybe they're about, you can relate to them, or I mean their relatability, and they're short, and all that. And I mean, you know, reading is not, I mean, like, why there's not great readers is because just people don't put in the time. They just want everything like handed to them on a platter. You know, they don't want to. I mean, I remember we were reading Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, and um, you know, like, and then the professor asked a few questions to different people. A few people he probably thought didn't read the book or were lightweights, and you know, like, if you don't read the books, I mean, you don't, you know, sometimes you don't want to. I know the feeling, like you don't know the answers. You feel kind of silly in class, you know, because you haven't read the work, and or maybe you don't understand it or something, or you know. I mean, like, I think that happened to me one time when I was reading The Ravishing of Lowell Stein by Marguerite Duras. You know, maybe I didn't understand it uh, too much, but I mean, there's ways of, you know, that's a way more difficult book than any of the books I've mentioned. You know, I think that one, or you know, Finnegan's Wake, maybe, or you know, books by Julian Rios, or um, who wrote who's that German? Not Heiner Mueller, but the other guy. You know, the guy that wrote who the Bottom's Dream. Who wrote that book? I mean, some um, or no, but Daddy's Children. Who's the German writer? I have to look it up. But yeah, check out those books. I mean, you know, or even Gertrude Stein. There. I mean, there's and some of the Beckett's novels are difficult. You know, but Clockwork Orange isn't difficult, and some of these other books, E.M. Forster's not very difficult. So that's it. That's Calypso. It's like their introduction to Leopold Bloom, the main character. He's doing everyday things. It's like slow. We're 4 chapters in, and very little has happened. I mean, there's a lot of funny jokes and quirk. You know, there's a lot of literary references and Joycean quirks, and you pick up on that. You know, I mean, if, I mean, you could just see on the page. I mean, there's like tons of things to like pick up on, and I mean, like I recently read. I don't know if I mentioned this in other videos, but I recently read the Brothers Karamazov, and uh, like there's a new translation, and I didn't even remember reading that book. You know, I definitely read the Grand Inquisitor part, but I don't know. I think read the. I mean, maybe I started reading the first part and stuff, but you know, I get it now. I mean, it's a hard book to read. There's a lot of characters. It's like Russia. It takes place in the 1860s or whatever. It's like it's difficult. You know, you just write down a couple notes, and you know, just kind of just read closely and just kind of like figure out where you are, and you know, kind of like there's the 3 brothers, and the dad's like kind of drunk all the time, and they you know, they're kind of into different things. One guy's like more of a philosopher, and you know, I kind of read it because I remember having a class, and I don't know if we were talking about that book, but um, I had one professor that was like one of those ones where he would you know, he would make us read some books, or you know, 100 pages, and he would like quote some dialogue, and oh, who's talking here, you know, like, and it was like, you know, but if you read the book, you would know who was saying that, because like, you know, like, you know, like this the Karamazov. I mean, they were all kind of different. They spoke in different ways. Probably we get that more in the Russian, maybe. Okay, so I'm going for 25 minutes. That's enough. That's enough for Calypso. That's part 4. That's the end. Modernism's the best. I'm gonna be doing this all summer. Okay, thank you.